The moment I arrived, the original occupant was already gone. She was a sheltered young woman who had lost her mother. Despite being the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister, she suffered endlessly. Her stepmother was cruel, her confidants indifferent, and the childhood friend she saw as her only hope deliberately led her into the hands of villains. Despairing, she ended her life by hitting her head against a wall. A pitiful girl, so fragile and unable to protect herself, left to be preyed upon. But I'm different. I kill without batting an eye. And I eat people without salt. I'll avenge her. Gloomy Sweet Potato reminds you, the novel Ancient-Style Daughter begins now. When I transmigrated, the original spirit was already dead. She had died by smashing her head against a wall. A gaping hole on her scalp. Blood gushing out like a geyser. I nearly died from the pain myself. Looking down, I saw my naked body, covered in bruises. Then, I looked up at the disheveled man before me. I didn't need to inherit the original body's memories. I instantly understood what had happened to her. The slovenly man was still chuckling. A rich young lady is truly something else. So delicate. And even your screams are especially soft. Haha. It's not a bad deal for you to be with me. From now on, you're my wife of the stronghold. I looked at him, confused. Bro. Didn't you see the hole in my head? Were you hiding when I hit the wall? As I thought this, my gaze suddenly landed on a sharp protrusion in a corner of the cave. I understood now. After being defiled, the original host, in utter despair, had thrown herself at that stone, dying silently when the slovenly man wasn't paying attention. I sighed. My dear sister, it's better to live a wretched life than to die well. You just left like that? What a waste. At least you should have taken a few of them with you. I covered the hole on my head, intending to find something to bandage it. But then I felt the wound under my hand rapidly healing. Well. Am I Spider-Man now? Is this a perk for transmigrators? Regardless, after the wound on my head healed, the feeling of being at death's door finally vanished. I let out a big sigh of relief. Then, in the man's astonished gaze, I feigned coyness, pouncing on him and wrapping my arms around his neck. Husband, you've taken my body. So from now on, I am yours. The man wrapped his arm around my waist, his hand greedily stroking my smooth skin. You're sensible. Young ladies are indeed understanding. I maintained my charming smile, my finger tracing circles on the man's chest. Husband, are you hungry? How about your concubine goes and makes you some food? After you're full, we can. The man's eyes were a mix of confusion, surprise, and suspicion. You really mean it? Oh. My. I pretended to shyly turn my face away. Husband is brave. And I am quite pleased. The man was shocked but quickly relaxed, laughing heartily as he took off his jacket and draped it over me. All right. Go make some food. Let me taste your cooking. On the way to the kitchen, I searched the original body's memories and finally got some scattered information. This was a bandit's den, and the original occupant was the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister. A true young lady, who had unfortunately been abducted here by bandits and lost her innocence. The original occupant's name was Ning Shadong. The same as mine. The bandits had appeared suddenly on her way to pray at the temple. In a very peculiar way. As if they had known she would take that path and were waiting for her to walk right into their trap. There was likely a mastermind behind it. Perhaps because the original occupant had just died. The information I could gather was limited. But this was enough. I ignored the scrutinizing glances around me and calmly walked into the kitchen. The bandits all knew that I had already been enjoyed by their leader. Seeing my disheveled clothes, they must have known I had been stripped naked by him and thoroughly inspected. So there was certainly nothing problematic. Thus, they felt very at ease letting me cook. They even told me to make a lot and prepare portions for everyone else. Even if we can't taste the young lady, at least we can taste her cooking. Right? The men around me chuckled lewdly. I feigned shrinking back and submissively agreed. After I entered the kitchen, smoke soon billowed from the chimney, and the aroma of food filled the entire bandit hideout. I made them large plate chicken. The era I had transmigrated to seemed to be a fictional world. And I couldn't determine the dynasty based on their clothing. However, common ingredients and seasonings were not lacking. Even in a bandit's den, I could make large plate chicken. They even had chili peppers. Can you believe it? Chili peppers only came to China in the Ming Dynasty. And these people are clearly not from the Ming Dynasty. But they speak Chinese. So it's likely a fictional world. Details aren't important. In short, I made large plate chicken. Then I discovered another loophole. In a world with such abundant ingredients and seasonings, the culinary skill was very low. From the bandits' astonished expressions when they saw the large plate chicken to their pig-like devouring, I could probably tell that these people had not eaten anything good before. How strange. What kind of person? For what purpose? Created such a flawed world? I'm so curious. After they finished eating, I brought out the wine from the kitchen. I personally filled a bowl and walked over, sitting squarely in the leader's lap. Husband, let me toast you. The leader, his face greasy from food, snatched the wine bowl from my hand and drank it in one gulp. Then he hoisted me onto his shoulder and walked towards his bedroom. Before, he had defiled me in a filthy cave. He had done it on purpose. Now that I was willing to submit to him, he would defile me in a clean bedroom. This was considered a favor. I tugged at his collar, urging him. Husband, hurry. I can't wait. He slapped my backside hard, and his strides became even wider. The people in the hall heard my urging and burst into laughter. What a young lady from the Prime Minister's residence. After being slept with, she's even more promiscuous than a girl from a brothel. The leader carried me back to the bedroom and casually tossed me onto the bed. Then, eager, he began to undress. I smiled at him. The next second, he clutched his stomach and vomited all over the floor. The intense dizziness made him unstable, and he collapsed into his own vomit. I sat on the bed, counting my fingers, and silently waited. The person by the bed struggled, moaning weakly, trying to grab me. I turned my head away, not looking at him. Anyway, he couldn't reach me. Soon, there was no more movement by the bed. The leader had fallen into a coma. I flipped off the bed and bent down to pull a dagger from his waist. It was more of a crude weapon, as long as my forearm. A lethal tool. I tested the blade with my fingertip, making sure it was sharp enough. I raised it high until I plunged it into the leader's chest. The comatose leader didn't even let out a grunt and died on the spot. I pulled out the dagger. Blood splattering all over my head and face. The powerful arterial spray even painted the wall. The wall was covered in blood-red plum blossoms. Exceptionally alluring. The transformation between hunter and prey was truly wondrous. I flicked the blood off the dagger, wiped my face, and pushed open the door to walk out. Outside the door, many people lay scattered. Seeing me, a snow person holding a knife, walking towards them. Some painfully groaned and tried to crawl away, while others cursed at me. I remained unmoved, mechanically harvesting lives. One knife per person. Only a few were still able to make noise. Most had already fallen unconscious. Vomit and excrement were everywhere. I killed with ease. I walked into the hall and glanced at the large plate chicken on the table. It was almost completely eaten, with only 1 or 2 potato chunks left on the plate. They must have been too full to eat them. I picked up a cold potato chunk and quietly stared at it. Solanine. The toxin primarily accumulated in potato sprouts. Is highly poisonous. Ingesting 0.2 to 0.4 grams can be fatal. Familiar data rapidly flowed through my mind. I casually tossed the potato away and sneered. These idiots actually stacked many potatoes in the kitchen. In that warm, damp kitchen, an entire sack of potatoes had sprouted. Killing them was too easy. The dose of solanine in these potato sprouts might not be enough to kill all of them, but it's more than enough to make them nauseous, dizzy, vomit, and go into shock, thus losing their ability to fight. Potatoes first. Then I harvest. Perfect. I surveyed the bandits' den, confirming there were no stragglers. And everyone was dead. Only then did I return to the woodshed to get some firewood to heat water. I took some time to have a hot bath, washing away the grime and changing into clean clothes. The undergarments I found among the bandits' loot. I must say, bathing alone in this quiet bandits' den, surrounded by corpses, was a novel experience. There was an inexpressible sense of security. After washing up, I dressed neatly and stepped over the corpses, searching room by room until I finally found the leader's study. I pulled out the drawers, took out the letters and documents, and reviewed them one by one. I discovered something very interesting. There were many letters exchanged between the bandits and Gu Chongqing. Gu Chongqing seemed to be the mastermind behind this bandits' den. All of the bandits' actions were carried out under Gu Chongqing's command. Gu Chongqing? According to the original host's memories, this name belongs to her childhood friend, the boy she grew up with, her childhood sweetheart, who verbally promised to marry her, but secretly fostered a den of bandits and intentionally had them abduct and defile her. How interesting. This childhood friend. The original host had truly suffered the worst luck to have such a childhood sweetheart. But something wasn't right. According to the original host's memories, Gu Chongqing was merely the son of a 5th-rank censor. How could the son of a mere 5th-rank official afford to support such a large bandits' den? He must have someone else behind him, though I didn't know who yet. I ransacked the entire study, even knocking on the walls, to ensure no hidden compartments or overlooked clues. Only then did I put away the evidence of Gu Chongqing's collusion with the bandits and take it with me. If used well, these things could ruin Gu Chongqing and leave him utterly destroyed. I slowly walked out of the bandits' den. Under the bright moonlight, I took one last look at the dark bandits' den. Then, I turned my head, smiling, and cast all that filth and grime behind me. Next, it was time for revenge. The Prime Minister's residence was already in chaos. News that the eldest daughter of the Prime Minister's residence had gone out to pray and was unfortunately abducted by bandits quickly spread throughout the capital. The mastermind behind it desperately wanted to spread the news to everyone as quickly as possible. But they would never have imagined that I would escape from the bandits' den so quickly. So, when I was surrounded by maids and nannies, entering the great hall like a celestial maiden surrounded by stars, everyone was petrified. Tonger. You. How are you here? My stepmother's eyes were wide. And the handkerchief she used to hide her smile fell to the ground in shock. My father and all my siblings also stared at me, dumbfounded. I perfectly displayed a bewildered expression. What is everyone doing here? Why did I just hear someone say that I was abducted by bandits? Everyone exchanged glances. Then their gazes focused on my stepmother. It was my stepmother who had brought back the news. My stepmother flinched, then let out a dry wail and feigned tears as she rushed towards me. Tonger. How did you escape? Didn't those bandits say they would take you back as their chieftain's wife? They were even tearing at your clothes. My stepmother scrutinized me up and down, but found no trace of having been defiled on my face. And she stiffened. I grabbed my stepmother's wrist and gently pushed her away a bit, not letting her block me. Mother. What are you saying? Have you gone mad? Your daughter went to Grading Temple to pray, ate the vegetarian meal, and came back. How could mother take advantage of this to spread rumors that your daughter was defiled by bandits? My stepmother stared blankly at me, but her mouth still struggled to nail me to the pillar of shame. Tonger. What are you saying? I saw with my own eyes that you were taken by bandits. Mother. Watch yourself. I suddenly roared, glaring angrily at my stepmother. Your daughter went out safely and returned safely. Nothing unexpected happened. Why must mother humiliate your daughter like this? Even if mother is possessed or enchanted, she should not speak wildly and tarnish the reputation of the Prime Minister's residence. Seeing this, everyone understood what was happening. My stepmother's anxious, dying appearance betrayed her malicious intentions completely. Father glared fiercely at my stepmother and said coldly, Someone. Take her away. Make her kneel in the ancestral hall for 2 days. Make her think clearly about what should and shouldn't be said. As the lady of the house, if she doesn't know how to protect the reputation of the Prime Minister's residence, then she shouldn't be one. Father's words were extremely harsh. My stepmother was so frightened that she swallowed all her slandering words. She deeply understood father's temperament. At this point, she couldn't produce any evidence that I had been defiled by bandits. And I had returned too quickly, making it impossible to pin this accusation on me. Without any proof. If she still insisted on saying I had lost my innocence, father would be the first to object. So, she could only be reluctantly taken away by the nannies and obediently knelt in the ancestral hall. After my stepmother was taken away, the hall instantly fell silent. This farce began inexplicably and ended just as inexplicably. Many people still hadn't figured out what was going on. I bowed slightly to father, showing a worried expression. Father. On my way back, your daughter already heard rumors outside that your daughter was abducted by bandits. Why did this groundless rumor spread so quickly? Even our own household hasn't heard it. But it's already spread everywhere outside. Whose hand is it that wishes to tarnish father's official reputation? Father. You must thoroughly investigate this. Father's eyes darkened. He scrutinized me for a moment. Then suddenly said, "You. Come with me." With that, father walked towards his study. I gave a slight smile to my siblings in the hall, then gracefully followed him. This comeback. For now, I had one. Inside the study, father sat behind his desk, watching me with an extremely cold gaze. I calmly met his gaze. I knew that the act just now might fool others, but it would never fool father. An old fox in officialdom. He knew that this matter was very likely orchestrated by my stepmother. But he didn't know how I escaped from the bandits and bit back at my stepmother. He needed to know what exactly happened. "Did you truly not suffer anything?" father asked in a deep voice. I shook my head. "No." "Then how did you escape?" "Father. Don't you think that because mother is gone, my maternal family has had no contact with your daughter these years?" I lightly curled my lips. "Chincher wanted to tarnish your daughter's innocence and harm her life. Thankfully, my grandfather provided people to protect your daughter in the shadows. Otherwise, your daughter truly doesn't know if she could have come back to see father." Father immediately remembered my maternal family's influence, and a look of understanding appeared on his face. "So it was your maternal family. Did they handle the aftermath cleanly?" I raised a slightly arrogant smile. "Of course, father. Rest assured. Not a single bandit was missed." I then made a throat-slitting gesture. Only then did father let out a long sigh of relief. I continued. "Your daughter can guarantee that the news will never leak from the bandits' side. However, Chincher clearly wanted to kill your daughter, not hesitating to sacrifice the reputation of the Prime Minister's residence. This is something your daughter cannot control." I ignored father's suddenly darkened expression and smiled as I bowed with cupped hands. "Your daughter has done her best. As for how to control that viper and how to clarify the rumors and salvage the Prime Minister's residence's reputation, that's up to father." My subtle accusation was highly successful. That very night, I heard a nanny report back that father had gone to the ancestral hall and severely reprimanded my stepmother. Chincher. He even slapped her twice, so hard that her nose bled and her cheeks swelled, leaving her with no trace of a mistress's dignity. Father threatened to divorce her and extracted the means by which she had spread the information. Thus, father immediately dispatched people overnight to deal with those who had spread the rumors. At the same time, he assigned people to lurk in densely populated areas. And as soon as they heard any rumors unfavorable to me, they were to immediately seize the person, give them a beating, and then turn them over to the authorities for punishment. Meanwhile, father also ordered me to frequently attend gatherings among noble young ladies and show myself more often, to let more people know that I was never harmed. Naturally, I was happy to cooperate. After this series of actions, the rumors about me in the capital quickly subsided. The Prime Minister's residence's reputation was saved. However, my stepmother, Chincher, suffered father's thunderous wrath because of this incident. After kneeling in the ancestral hall for a few days, father still ignored her. It had been a month since he had entered her room, and he now spent every night at concubine Yin's place. This was a clear and blatant slap to her face and a warning to others in the residence who might harbor malicious intentions against the Prime Minister's residence's reputation that they would suffer an even worse fate than my stepmother. After this incident, my status also rose. Father believed my lie. mistakenly thinking that I could still influence my maternal family's decisions, and thus protected me more. The servants in the residence, who watched how their master treated people, observed this shift in the master's attitude and became increasingly attentive towards me. And under father's instruction, I frequently entered and exited the Prime Minister's residence, always attending a flower banquet of this noble young lady or a poetry gathering of that one. This further highlighted father's regard for me, making my status even more distinguished. For a time, I was truly flourishing in the residence, like a fire blazing fiercely. The eldest daughter, who had always been inconspicuous, suddenly became radiant and the focus of everyone's attention. This was treatment the original host had never received since her birth mother's death. Yet, I effortlessly regained it. For me, it was an easy power struggle. For the original host, it was a finish line she hadn't reached in 10 years. The original host was ultimately just a 16-year-old sheltered girl. She was no genius. Under the circumstances of her father's passing and her stepmother's torment, she couldn't spontaneously learn about vision, struggle, or strategy in her secluded chambers. She was rigidly confined within a narrow framework, where even her smiles had to be just right. You couldn't expect a child who had been disciplined and cold-shouldered since childhood to actively break free from delusion and take control of her life. Moreover, she was surrounded by wolves and tigers, each an unconquerable giant. Etiquette and filial piety weighed her down. Her misfortune was already predetermined. I arrived too late to save her. All I could do for her was to seek revenge. In the Prime Minister's residence, I only had 3 goals: power, power, and more damned power. So, I constantly stayed close to father, because father was the center of power in this Prime Minister's residence. Father wanted me to attend more gatherings of noble young ladies to stabilize the Prime Minister's residence's reputation. So, I took the opportunity to ask father to open his purse and buy me the most expensive cloud brocade for dresses and the most fashionable accessories to make a good impression. The first time I approached father, he instinctively said, "Such matters of the inner chambers. You may simply ask your mother to arrange them." After speaking, he waited for half a moment. Not hearing my obedient departure, he looked up and found me still standing there, smiling silently, looking at him. My unusual stillness, my refusal to leave without a word, finally made father recall what my stepmother had recently done. Father, a man who generally forgot easily unless his own interests were involved, had casually uttered words that suggested I seek arrangements from that viper. He cleared his throat, covering his discomfort and guilt. "How much money do you need? Take my tally and go to the treasury to collect it." I looked at the tally father tossed on the desk, but didn't pick it up immediately. Instead, I asked loudly, "Daughter, the upcoming gatherings are for the most prominent noble young ladies in the capital." "Father, do you know what that means?" "What do you mean?" father asked, confused. "A single set of accessories for a noble young lady in the capital can be worth 1,000 gold pieces," I said slowly. "As for dresses, not only must the fabric be the best, and a single dress cost hundreds of taels, the most important thing is that a noble lady's dress is only worn once. Aside from the one worn, 2 more sets of the same quality must be prepared in case of spills at the banquet, leaving no change of clothes and making one a laughingstock." I looked directly at father and bowed with a smile. "Your daughter has never attended noble ladies' gatherings before." Because your daughter's monthly allowance was only 2 taels. Let alone buying decent clothes and accessories. Even hosting a meal would be unthinkable. And Chinchur has never provided your daughter with any high-quality clothes or accessories. So father has never known about these trivial matters. But now that your daughter must attend noble ladies' gatherings, for the sake of the Prime Minister's residence's reputation, no matter how much it pains you, this money must be spent. So what your daughter wishes to ask, father, is how much silver this tally of yours can actually withdraw from the treasury? Father, who had initially only intended to give me a pittance to send me away, discovered that I had obtained his tally and could withdraw unlimited funds from the treasury. Chinchur, as expected, couldn't sit still. She ran to father's study to argue. And as they argued, both grew increasingly agitated, eventually escalating into a big fight. But Chinchur was in the wrong. The more she fussed, the more father remembered that the reason I had to frequently attend gatherings was to clarify the Prime Minister's residence's reputation. And the reason it needed clarifying was because Chinchur had caused trouble by trying to frame me. In other words, the reason he had to spend so much extra money was because of Chinchur's immorality. And Chinchur not only didn't reflect, but dared to argue with him. Father grew even angrier. So Chinchur received another 2 slaps and was gifted with a 3-day ancestral hall package. Hearing the news reported by the nannies, I laughed so hard I rolled on the bed. My personal maid, Sishi, was a bit puzzled and asked me, Miss, why did Madam dare to provoke such trouble? Didn't she forget what she had just done not long ago? I slowly stirred the sweet soup in the small bowl with a slender golden spoon, absent-mindedly explaining to her. Sishi, some people, once they've been in a winning streak for too long and formed a fixed mindset, find it very difficult to reverse it suddenly. Chinchur has controlled the Prime Minister's residence for 10 years, trampling the original host, the eldest daughter, underfoot for 10 years. She has long been accustomed to her high status and position. So how could she truly be willing to submit? Even if her reason tells her that now is not a good time to clash with her husband, her emotions take precedence over her reason. Even if it means arguing with her husband. She doesn't want to see me live the life of a noble lady as I wish. People are always driven by emotion, no matter how rational they claim to be. This is something I already knew from various criminal cases before I transmigrated. Even the most heinous and cold-blooded criminals will choose to surrender rather than risk scaring their mothers, even if a handgun is in a drawer right next to them. Reason tells them that if they kill the police before they react and escape, there is still a chance of survival. But emotional drive makes them willing to give up that chance of survival. People are always driven by emotion, even those with antisocial personality disorder. But there's a difference in how people are close or distant to one another. So Chinchur's move was expected. Arrogant people find it most unbearable when an ant that once crawled at their feet suddenly becomes someone they need to defer to and respect. Just the thought of me becoming someone who can stand as their equal makes them squirm. So she will definitely go and cause trouble for father. I sighed, slowly finishing the sweet soup in my bowl. So-called strategy is nothing more than understanding human nature. That's all. It's as if I was born knowing strategy. So I am destined to thrive in this household. My stepmother, Chinchur, failed to frame me and suffered repeated setbacks, causing her status in the Prime Minister's residence to decline. This decline was only relative. She was still the mistress who controlled the Prime Minister's inner quarters and had the final say. It was just that she could no longer control me. Because I had successfully escaped her control through the bandit incident. My monthly allowance was not managed by her. My clothes and accessories were not managed by her. And my daily life was reported directly to father and arranged by myself. I had become a distinguished mistress. So, with the rise and fall, she felt her status had declined. Indeed, after suffering repeated heavy blows, Chencher grew anxious. It was at this time that Gu Chongqing appeared. When that clear-faced, handsome young man stood before me, a wave of sadness washed over me. I clutched my chest and silently chanted, "Don't be sad. He's not worth it." But the emotional didn't subside. Instead, it intensified. I knew her heart was unwilling. I already knew that she and the young man once had innocent childhood memories. Gu Chongqing was different to Ning Shadong. He was once a ray of light that pierced through Ning Shutong's dark life. He symbolized a beautiful future and hope. But now, knowing that the beautiful memories were fake, the future was fake, and hope was fake, and that the clear-faced young man's inner self had long since rotted into a black maggot, how could she not be sad? I understood her. But now was truly not the time for sadness. Facing Gu Chongqing, I had to be fully alert. I forcefully suppressed the emotions from the original host and looked up. Meeting Gu Chongqing's deep gaze, I remained unmoved. Because I already knew the capabilities of this dog of a man from the original host's memories. Even if he looked at a pig, his gaze would be filled with affection. Truly excellent acting. Tong Tong. Does your heart hurt? He noticed my hand clutching my chest and asked with concern. I didn't answer his question. Instead, I stared at him fixedly, my eyes gradually filling with sorrow. Chongqing, do you know what I've been through these past few days? He was startled by my question and subconsciously replied. What's been wrong with you recently? He didn't think I would suffer any grievances in the Prime Minister's residence lately. On the contrary, the news he received was that I was thriving in the Prime Minister's residence. And even Chincher had to avoid my sharp edge. So, he was genuinely confused. My eyes were distant. I gently pushed him away. You don't care about me at all. It's been so long. And you haven't even sent a message. Sooner or later, if that Chincher grinds me to death, you won't even know. Gu Chongqing didn't understand. But he knew he should go along with me now. Tong Tong. What exactly happened? Tell me. I tried to recall past sorrows. Weeping profusely. I can't marry now. I'm no longer pure. It's all because of that Chincher. It's all her fault. She deserves to die. Gu Chongqing trembled at my words, suddenly grasping my hand and asking anxiously. Tong Tong. What did you say? You said you're not pure? I cried, trembling all over, and nodded softly. Gu Chongqing's heart swelled with joy, and the corners of his mouth turned up high. But when I looked up at him, he quickly pressed his lips down. But earlier, wasn't it said that the bandit incident was just a rumor? No. Chongqing. I won't live. Father. For the sake of the Prime Minister's residence's reputation, covered up my matter. But I'm no longer a virgin. If I were to marry someday, and my husband found out on our wedding night that I'm not a virgin, what then? I started crying again, stomping my feet in frustration. Recently, The third prince and father have been quite close. Father seems to intend to marry me off to the third prince. But I cried again. Wouldn't that be deceiving the emperor? What will I do then? Gu Chongqing understood everything. He was both surprised and overjoyed. Hastily gripping my hand. Tong Tong. Listen to me. Why don't you marry me? I feigned surprise. Tears still clinging to the corners of my eyes. Looking as if I had never expected him to say such a thing. Gu Chongqing wiped away my tears. His gaze filled with sincerity. Tong Tong. From childhood, I've longed to marry you and bring you home. You are the most wonderful girl in my heart. If Lord Swixiang would consent to your marriage, I would be eternally grateful and humbly accept. Never to fail you in this life. I pretended to be overjoyed. My tears turning into a bright smile. That's wonderful. Chongqing. You don't despise me. I'm truly happy. I knew you were sincere to me. So when will you come to propose? I'll go back and inform my parents and ask them to arrange it for me. Tong Tong. Don't worry. Wait for me. I'll wait for you. I tugged at Gu Chongqing's sleeve and cautioned him. Chongqing. My secret. Besides father. Only you know. Please. You must not tell your parents. If they knew that their future daughter-in-law had already. Then I wouldn't want to live either. Tong Tong. Don't worry. I promise I won't tell. Chongqing. You're so good to me. I tearfully waved my handkerchief. Watching him leave in a hurry. Then I turned around. Casually wiped my face. And returned to my expressionless state. The show was about to begin. Gu Chongqing had already formed an alliance with Qinshi. My encounter with the bandits this time was also intentional on his part. But clearly, according to their plan, they didn't want my life, but merely wanted to ruin my innocence. This was very interesting. In other words, for them, a living me was more valuable than a dead me. And from Gu Chongqing's reaction, I also learned that for them, a me with a tarnished reputation was more valuable than a me with a perfect reputation. From these two known conditions, combined with the functional role of secluded women in ancient times, I could generally deduce Gu Chongqing's intentions. As the son of a censor, he was a commoner and had not yet achieved any official rank. Therefore, he was not a suitable match for me, the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister. If it weren't for having studied together in the old master's academy in their hometown during childhood, a son of a fifth-rank official like him would never have had the right to stand before me. Class barriers existed in every era and were nothing new. Gu Chongqing wanted to cross this barrier. So he wanted to marry me. Not out of love, but simply to use me as a stepping stone to reach higher fruits. But my father was the left Prime Minister. How could the legitimate daughter of the left Prime Minister marry down to the son of a fifth-rank official? And using a Prime Minister's daughter as a stepping stone was too arrogant. He never dared to show such intentions publicly. He also knew that he couldn't make decisions about my marriage. So he sought out Qinshi. He saw Qinshi's resentment towards me. He knew that as long as she could make me suffer endlessly and fail, Qinshi would pay any price. He and Qinshi hit it off instantly. The two of them collaborated to bring the original host to her demise. Then he proposed to marry the original host. This would make things easy to accomplish. Noble women in ancient times didn't necessarily have to die if they lost their honor, but only if they had parents and relatives willing to protect them. And Ning Shadong didn't. So, if Ning Shudong didn't want to die, she only had to marry him. His calculations were very precise. And I wanted him to make those calculations precisely. Only then could the subsequent good show begin. As expected. A few days later, Gu Chongqing's father, Censor Gu Chen, personally came to propose marriage. It wasn't Censor who received Gu Chen, but my father. After a month of huge financial expenditures on my clothes, accessories, banquets, and investments in noble young ladies, father had already invested too much sunk cost in me. Although he hadn't painstakingly raised me, he had genuinely spent a lot of money. So he didn't dare to leave my marriage to Chinchur, lest Chinchur cause all his money to go down the drain. He had to personally vet every suitor, repeatedly weighing his options to choose the one that would maximize his benefits, ensuring he could sell me for a high price before he felt at ease. So, when Censor Guchen came to propose marriage, father's face immediately showed displeasure. A mere fifth-rank official's family was too lowly. However, father, having been an official for many years and being smooth in his dealings, was not an unsophisticated snob. Even though he had already mentally dismissed the idea, father still politely received Lord Gu. After listening to Lord Gu's persuasive words, father respectfully declined, expressing his reluctance to part with his young daughter and wishing to keep her by his side for a few more years. It should have been a pleasant and harmonious exchange, followed by some casual talk about national affairs, and then dealt with. After all, who in officialdom didn't have a discerning heart that understood matters? But who knew that after father subtly declined Lord Gu, Lord Gu's expression changed? Then Lord Gu, not giving up, tried to persuade him again, but father still politely refused. Lord Gu clenched the armrest of his chair and continued to promote his son. Father refused 3 times and waved his hand, indicating he no longer wished to discuss the matter. Tea is important. Tea. Tea. Finally, Lord Gu looked around, saw no one nearby, and leaned closer to father, whispering something. The precise words were not heard by the junior official responsible for gathering news from the front. But what happened after he spoke was known to everyone. Father was seen erupting in rage, splashing the hot tea from his teacup all over Lord Gu's face. "You insolent wretch! How dare you speak so wildly? You insult the purity of my Prime Minister's residence. You deserve to die. You deserve to die!" Lord Gu yelped as the hot tea scalded him, covering his red face and shouting something about, "This matter is known to heaven and earth. To you and to me. If Lord Zhuxiang agrees, this matter will not spread." Then he was cornered by father, given a good beating, and thrown out of the residence. Father kicked him out of the residence and angrily instructed the gatekeepers that the Gu family's people should never be allowed to enter again. He then turned and went back to his study to write a memorial, preparing to impeach Gu Chen at the morning court the next day. I listened to the news relayed by the nannies, a smirk playing on my lips. My hands, working on something, continued to finely grind fresh red petals in a mortar. She stood by, adding camellia seed oil for me, while Wanzi lay on the table, watching me grind and emitting intoxicated exclamations. "Miss, your hands are so beautiful." I freed a hand and poked Wanzi's forehead with my index finger. "You only know how to appreciate beauty." She chuckled. "Wanzi has always been like this since she was little. She sticks to whoever is good-looking." This child has been a looks fanatic since she was small. I taught them the term looks fanatic. Ever since they learned it, they delighted in accusing each other of being looks fanatics. I glanced at my own hands and also thought they were quite beautiful. Slender, fair, and graceful fingers. Lovely in any gesture. The original host's beauty could be glimpsed from these jade hands. And the original host's beauty was said to be less than 3/10 of her birth mother's. One could imagine that the original host's mother's beauty must have been a rare, peerless splendor. Unfortunately, in this cannibalistic world, even the most beautiful and fragile women could not live long. Chincher's extreme hatred for the original host was likely also due to the original host's mother. The original host's existence constantly reminded Chincher's husband that he once had such a captivating wife. So Chincher tormented the original host like a madwoman. As if the more miserable the original host's life was, the more Chincher could surpass the white moonlight in her husband's heart. How ridiculous! The maids bantered with each other. And I quietly listened. My hands idly grinding paddles. My thoughts already drifting 1,000 miles away. Miss, it's almost done. I'll help you sift it. Wanzi's clear voice rang in my ears. I suddenly snapped back to reality and subconsciously handed over the mortar. Wanzi, oblivious, took the mortar and poured out the flour powder, carefully sifting it. See, she noticed my distraction. Miss, are you all right? Are you worried about Lord Goo's marriage proposal? I shook my head and chuckled. Yes and no. Miss, I don't understand. Father is already writing a memorial to impeach Gu Qin. But tomorrow's morning court. Father will surely be astonished. Does he think beating someone up, throwing them out of the house, and impeaching them is the end of it? My naive old father. This is just the beginning. The real show is yet to come. Soon father will know how disgusting the Gu family is. As expected, the next day's morning court was a back and forth, full of climaxes, almost escalating into an all-out brawl. Father was about to impeach Gu Qin. But unexpectedly, Gu Qin was a step ahead of father, pulling out a memorial and saying he wanted to impeach father. Father was stunned. He had been an official for many years and had seen all sorts of situations. But he had never seen such a shameless person. Gu Qin publicly declared in the main hall, in front of all the civil and military officials, that the Prime Minister's legitimate daughter, Ning Shadong, had been abducted and was no longer pure. She might even be carrying the bastard child of some villain. And father, he claimed, foolishly intended to marry such a used shoe to the third prince, which was a grave act of deceiving the emperor. Father was furious, stomping his feet. Wanner has always been well-behaved and dutiful. She is pure. Heaven and earth can attest to it. Furthermore, with the emperor above. How dare you, old scoundrel, slander her reputation with your loose tongue? Yesterday, you spouted nonsense and got a beating from me. Yet you still haven't learned your lesson. Today, you dare to spread malicious lies here again. Old man. Old man. I'll fight you. With that, father rolled up his sleeves, ready to brawl. Gu Qin, who had been beaten by father yesterday, naturally knew that father was not only brilliant in literature but also quite skilled in martial arts. Seeing father, like a fierce tiger descending from the mountain, charging towards him aggressively, he immediately hid behind a certain military general and dared not show his face. Father wanted to beat him but was blocked by the general. So he angrily chased him in circles. Thus, with the general as the center, Father and Guchen began an endless Qin Wang pattern. The dignity of the court had long been swept away. The officials either watched, tried to mediate, or secretly snickered. Except for the poor general. Not a single person stepped forward to break up the fight. Everyone was busy watching the show. Finally, the emperor intervened. And Father finally gave up his desire to beat that old rascal Guchen to death. However, turning around, Father ran to the foot of the jade steps, slid onto his knees, and loudly kowtowed, proclaiming, "Your Majesty, your humble servant has been wronged. I beg your Majesty to do me justice. Your Majesty, my daughter, whom I doted on and who was cherished as a pearl in our family since childhood, has never even had a scratch. Yet, she is now falsely accused by a villain without reason. How can a decent young lady have her reputation so defiled? Isn't this trying to force her to her death? Your Majesty, your Majesty, you must uphold justice for your humble servant. Your Majesty, your humble servant suffers an unrighted wrong. An unrighted wrong." Father's dramatic performance was fluid and flawless. The final phrase, "an unrighted wrong," stretched out with a rising tone, causing listeners to shiver. The emperor felt a headache coming on. He was indirectly intimidated by the left prime minister, who cried until tears streamed down his face, kneeling on the ground and refusing to get up. The emperor was torn. He could only glare fiercely at Guchen. Regardless of whether the girl was pure or not, even if she had been defiled by bandits, that was her own private matter. What did it have to do with an old scoundrel like him? But the emperor couldn't say that directly in court. Fortunately, the emperor wasn't new to his throne. He could see that there were many twists and turns behind this matter, so he wouldn't make a rash judgment. Looking at the left prime minister's trembling shoulders, the emperor said in a deep voice, "A daughter's purity is not a trivial matter, and it should not be overly publicized. Let's adjourn court for today. We will discuss this later." After court, Father immediately returned to the residence and called me to his study. I walked into Father's study, elegantly and gracefully straightened my skirt, and stood still, bowing to Father. "Father, how are you?" Father waved his hand, telling me to dispense with the formalities. "Tonger, there is something your father must ask you clearly and in detail." I smiled calmly. "Father, please ask. Did you lose your honor?" Father's tone was stern, and he heavily emphasized the words "lose your honor." I maintained my calm, unchanging smile. "No, Father. Tonger, if you truly lost your honor, you don't have to be afraid. Tell Father boldly. Father will find a way to cover it up for you. Otherwise, when the imperial governess comes from the palace to inspect you, if you are not intact, it will tarnish the family's prestige." I nodded, indicating understanding. Father looked at me with a mix of anticipation and fear. "Tonger," Father asked you one more time, "are you intact?" I nodded gracefully, elegantly, and calmly. Father finally let out a heavy sigh of relief. "That's good. That's good. Since that's the case, there's nothing to fear when the imperial governess comes to inspect you." "That's not right, Father." I interrupted father's sigh and said earnestly. Based on Gu Chen's mere words. I, as the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister, must accept this almost humiliating inspection? Today, this person suspects your daughter's purity. Tomorrow that person suspects your daughter's purity. Must your daughter be inspected every time to prove her innocence? If father so easily accepts this inspection, I'm afraid even if your daughter is truly pure, her reputation will no longer be good. Father's expression grew serious again. Tonger is absolutely right. Father suddenly stood up and paced around the study twice. His brows furrowed in deeper worry. But if we don't accept the inspection, how can Tonger prove her innocence and salvage her reputation? Father, proving one's innocence is meaningless, I said. If one falls into the trap of proving one's innocence, then endless self-justifications will follow. Not to mention whether that imperial governess might be bribed by someone with ulterior motives and deliberately make false accusations. Even if the imperial governess proves your daughter's innocence, what if someone colludes with father and says father bribed the governess? If, later, the governess is bribed again and provides false testimony against father, how will father then prove his innocence? Listening to my series of questions, father increasingly felt that the path of proving innocence should indeed not be taken. Whenever one proves innocence, the one proving it is inherently at a disadvantage compared to others. Because everything the one proving innocence does is to gain others' approval, placing themselves in a weaker position, hoping that others can judge them fairly. This is by no means a good choice. It was father who was not thorough in his thinking. Fortunately, Tonger, your mind is meticulous. Then, Tonger, what do you think is the best course of action? I leaned close to father's ear and whispered a few words. Father's eyes widened at first. Then he clicked his tongue in wonder. And finally, his eyes crinkled with laughter, applauding repeatedly. Tonger is indeed a talented woman. Such a shocking method. Only you could think of it. The title of talented woman is merely jest among friends. It's not to be taken seriously. Father, this method is far-reaching. If not handled well, we might incur public wrath. But since the Gu family wants to tarnish the Prime Minister's residence's reputation, we cannot be the only ones to suffer. Yes. Why should only our Ning family be unlucky? To slander the Prime Minister's daughter's honor is already shocking enough. Since that's the case, let's make an even bigger fuss. Stir the waters even muddier. Father laughed heartily. Then immediately left. He was going to submit a memorial to the emperor for an audience. To inform the emperor in advance. Cixi, behind me, asked worriedly in a low voice. Miss, will His Majesty really agree to such a method? I stood there for a long time, watching father's receding figure. He will. From the scattered information in this ancient novel, I knew that the emperor in this book was a dark psychopath. On the surface, he appeared generous and magnanimous. This magnanimity was reflected in the fact that he never demanded the common people avoid his given name and did not prevent them from creating works that arbitrarily depicted him in various ways. So everyone said he was a good emperor. However, his true character was far from the gentle image he projected to the common people. He was born to the former empress but lost his mother at a young age. He was not the current Empress Dowager's biological son. If not for the Empress Dowager remaining childless and ultimately adopting him, this awkward legitimate son, who had no birth mother and was not favored by his imperial father, would have lost his position as crown prince long ago. There was even a secret history circulating among the common people, claiming that the former empress was deliberately murdered, and that the current emperor had witnessed his mother's tragic death in his youth. This story was too bizarre, and few believed it. Only I, the transmigrator, knew that this rumor was actually the hidden truth. Experiencing such a childhood, even a normal person would develop a distorted and dark personality. Not to mention that the emperor later had to face the constraints of the entire civil official group. This made him outwardly gentle but inwardly violent. And he ultimately manifested this contradiction and pain through various rebellious behaviors. For example, he once suddenly announced that he would bring a pregnant woman into the palace as a concubine, facing fierce opposition from the entire court and harem, and risking the confusion of the imperial bloodline. He still accomplished it. Another example is that he and his adoptive mother, the current Empress Dowager, did not actually have a very harmonious relationship. He only outwardly respected her. But at the same time, he distributed power in the harem to another of the late emperor's concubines, Consort Jiang, who was not favored, now known as Grand Consort Jiang. The Empress Dowager, in a show of anger, announced that she would leave the palace to pray at a temple. In reality, she created a lot of public opinion among the common people, implicitly accusing the current emperor of being unfilial, trying to force him to humble himself and invite her back to the palace. But ultimately, after 5 years, she could only return sheepishly and continue to contend with Grand Consort Jiang, pretending nothing had happened. Such an emperor, suspicious, rebellious, and psychopathic. It's truly unknown how he managed to earn a reputation for generosity and magnanimity among the common people. The only direction I can guess is his strong desire to pursue and establish his own identity. So, my proposal could both help him suppress the entire civil official group and allow him to assert himself, leaving a significant mark in history. Even if it wasn't an excellent evaluation, it would certainly be an unprecedented and unparalleled act. I think he will agree. However, this emperor's inner self was actually very rebellious. This was evident from his past attempt to bring a pregnant woman into the palace as a concubine. He even disregarded such a serious matter as the potential mixing of the imperial bloodline. This shows that his outwardly generous and magnanimous appearance was a lie. In reality, he was a rare psychopath. He will agree, I said calmly. The next day, as expected, Guchen brought up the matter again, once more demanding that the prime minister's legitimate daughter, Ning Shadong, prove her innocence to clarify the situation to the world. The emperor then said, "No problem. Then I will send an experienced governess from the palace to inspect her." However, other officials then stepped forward, stating that this plan was improper. The prime minister's residence is a major concern. If Lord Swixiang were to bribe the governess in advance, or use some underhanded means to control the governess, forcing her to make false accusations, what then? Wouldn't that be deceiving His Majesty and committing a grave act of treason? The surrounding officials nodded in agreement. Father heard these baseless accusations. If I hadn't already given him a heads up, he would have exploded with anger. He hadn't even done anything yet, and he was already being accused of treason. These scoundrels killed without a knife, relying solely on their mouths. They could frame you with baseless accusations, which was truly despicable, infuriating, and hateful. Father clenched the tablet in his hand, silently chanting, Don't argue with fools. Don't argue with fools. The emperor, having been informed by father the day before, was not flustered by these accusations. He feigned hesitation and deep thought for a moment. Then suddenly smiled brightly. Since that's the case, then bring all your unmarried daughters, my dear ministers, and have them inspected together. Silence. A deathly silence. Everyone was dumbfounded. And for a moment, no one responded. The officials at first thought they had misheard. Only when the emperor reiterated his meaning did their suspended hearts finally die. They really hadn't misheard. Was the emperor insane? While the officials were still bewildered, the emperor seized the opportunity to speak rapidly. Firstly, the emperor believed that merely because of Gu Chen's one-sided words, requiring a noble young lady to be inspected was against proper etiquette. However, as a censor, since Gu Chen had raised such an accusation that damaged a reputation, the emperor could not ignore it. After weighing his options, the emperor decided that inspections could be conducted, but not just for the prime minister's daughter. Since Gu Chen made such damaging accusations against another family's daughter, he should also bring his own unmarried daughters to be inspected alongside her. As for other officials who agreed with Gu Chen and found nothing wrong with his actions, they too should follow suit and bring their unmarried daughters for inspection. At these words, the court instantly erupted in lamentation. The officials who had been standing by, gloating yesterday, finally understood what empathy meant. Father stood in the front row, stroking his beard and sighing leisurely. Today my body returns to my homeland. Tomorrow, your body will be the same. This made the officials who heard him shiver involuntarily. The named officials were furious. They all knelt and cried for mercy, hoping His Majesty would not involve their innocent daughters. Some even began to turn on Gu Chen, accusing him of improper conduct, saying he only cared about the private affairs under young girls' skirts, asking if he had no shame. The emperor watched contentedly as more than half of the court officials wailed in distress. He grinned. Don't worry. I will also arrange for some unbetrothed palace maids to join the inspection team. During the inspection, the young women must wear veils and not speak. Otherwise it will be considered cheating. I will also arrange for more than one governess. This way, we can ensure nothing goes wrong. The officials cried out for His Majesty to withdraw his decree. But the emperor was unmoved. Some stubborn ones tried to argue, but their mouths were immediately covered by their colleagues, and their heads were pressed to the ground, forcing them to kowtow. Shut up. Isn't this mess big enough already? The emperor spoke earnestly. I merely wish for my dear ministers to understand what leading by example means. If one can impeach others without evidence, merely relying on words to accuse them of a grave crime, then this is not justice, but rather a malicious attack. In my court, I do not wish to see civil and military officials who only know how to attack maliciously and do not know how to act practically. This matter is decided. All of you, dismiss the court. Upon hearing the emperor's words, the officials were utterly dismayed. Their minds screamed, "You lunatic emperor! What right do you have to speak so righteously here? How many outrageous things did you do yourself in the past that you don't even remember? Now you're here lecturing us." The officials gnashed their teeth in anger. But the emperor was thoroughly amused. He rattled off his decree like a machine gun.